The following podcast is brought to you by Iconic Nation Media. Welcome to Season 5 of Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Levy. I'm here to guide you on a journey of personal growth and fulfillment. Join me as we delve into the challenges of both business and personal life, aiming to discover our true selves and connect more deeply with the world around us. On this podcast, we'll explore the topics that inspire and empower us to become the best version of ourselves. From book reviews to interviews with iconic individuals, we'll have insightful conversations that resonate with your journey. And a big thank you to our sponsors, the Boys and Girls Club of America, Greater Conejo Valley, and Levy's Deli for supporting the show and helping us bring these valuable discussions to you. Please share, rate, and review the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. You can also leave your comments at Kimberly Levy on social media. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for listening. You guys, today I am joined by culture coach Becky Beaulieu. She's on our podcast and I'm super excited to have you here with us, Becky. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Kimberly.
I'm so happy that you're here. I know we all have so much to learn from you. Before we dive into all your genius, can you just tell us a little bit about where you're from, just a little bit about maybe like your family situation and things like that. And then I'd like to hear all about your business and your career.
Yeah, so from Hudson, Wisconsin, grew up in the Midwest. Family situation, I have a husband and two sons. Husband was a college baseball player for the University of Minnesota Gophers, and then my sons, my focus is athletics, although I do believe high-performing teams, you can take a lot of those concepts and apply them to high-performing businesses. But sons play baseball, basketball, swimming, all the things.
How old are your kids, your sons?
15 and 11. So we have a new driver. Scary.
Oh boy. Oh gosh, I'm not looking forward to that. Okay. I'm really excited to dig into all your genius. So you describe yourself as a culture coach, and can you tell us a little bit about why you choose culture, the term culture, to kind of showcase your business or what you kind of focus on in your business?
Yes. So I'm a culture coach and mental edge coach, mostly to NCAA teams. But how I got into this is I worked at the University of Wisconsin Stout for 18 years in the athletic department. And I was the women's gymnastics coach, and then the last 3 years, the mental health liaison for the whole athletic department, because I used to be a licensed psychologist. But the little bit of the backstory of how I got into this is 2018, our collegiate team that I was the head coach of, we went into the regional championship ranked 4th, and the top 3 move on to the national championship. Well, that year we had a lot of headbutting going on within the team, and we had a junior on the team that told her teammates, go ahead and book your spring break flights because we're not going to go to nationals. So sure enough, we went in and finished dead last, 8th of 8. And I do think ultimately some of that responsibility falls on the head coach or the owner or the manager in the business sense. So then 2019, the next year, decided to make the culture of our team the most important thing. And just did we have, was everybody on the bus going in the same direction? And did they genuinely want each other's success? How connected were we? Did we have a clear vision and core values that the team believes in? And that next year, we went from dead last to first in the conference. And the school's first ever conference championship. And so from there, I really continued studying and documenting culture. And, what does it look like on a men's basketball team? Does it matter when they go to put their hands in and, a few of them have their hands down and they're checked out, turned away? And the answer is yes, it does. Okay, so fast forward to 2022. I kept waking up thinking about this idea, Kimberly waking up thinking about this idea. And I did nothing with it for 2 months because I thought I'd retire from this university. I loved what I did. But I decided to send one email to John Gordon. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
So he's New York Times bestselling author of The Energy Bus, You Win in the Locker Room First, Power of a Positive Team. And he's paid $50,000 per speaking event to NFL, SEC, all the top collegiate and professional teams. And it said something like, would any of the teams that you speak to and serve 3 to 4 weeks after your super charismatic speech, would they benefit from a culture coach and someone who is trained in observation as a licensed psychologist and has worked in NCAA athletics for 2 decades to come in and do a minute-by-minute team culture observation of words, body language, standards, actions of a team, to then make championship culture recommendations for that team to improve their culture, get closer to this championship culture, and ultimately impact the win-loss record of their season. Blah, 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 send. And within 12 hours, his vice president Marlo and one other Angela within John Gordon Companies responded, and they loved the idea. And the best advice that he gave me was to do a pilot of it with 3 teams. So I did. So the first was this Adam Barta's Blizzard Baseball, and he's also an associate scout for the Chicago White Sox. The second was University of Illinois Women's Gymnastics, and I've continued to consult for both of them. And then the third was UW Stout Men's Basketball. But now I've gotten to work with about 25 teams. But what we figured out is improve your culture, winning is the byproduct. So teams that have used at least 3 of the championship culture recommendations, their winning percentage has gone up by 23% over the course of the entire season. So that's kind of the backstory.
So just in summary, what you found is through testing, through professional, whether college organizations or professional, you know, professional athletes, and across those professional teams, you found that enhancing the culture enhances results.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, what are
And my
some,
hypothesis is that in business, you
yes,
know, like who on your bus is not on the bus with their actions, right? And an increased profit is the byproduct of having a great culture in business. And I would love to know your thoughts about that, Kimberly.
oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's no question that culture is the key driver of all successful teams. And I love this paradox and I love this discussion between sports and business because there's so many parallels. And I know you and I both work with professional athletes, and you know, mindset and business and culture, these are all themes that will always transcend across all of these different kind of just different experiences that people have, regardless of kind of how they slot in. But every single person listening knows what it's like to have a bad boss that breeds a bad culture, and it's miserable. And it just makes you not want to be there. And to me, I have had the pleasure of, as a management consultant, I've worked with thousands of Fortune 500 organizations, and I've seen so many different kinds of leaders. And in all of those experiences, I always said to myself, I either really want to be like this leader because I see the impact on their team. You can see a good leader. The team, you get so much more out of your team when they feel valued and motivated and they truly want to be there and they want to contribute, versus if a boss or leader is toxic and breeds bad culture, then you can see it. Like, people are going to give the bare minimum because they hate their job. They don't want to be there. They don't feel good about themselves. Even if they work their hardest, they never get the recognition, etc. So it's overall bad culture is really detrimental. So I guess back to you also, what are some of the themes that you have seen? Like, when we think of culture, what are the biggest, like if you could summarize it in maybe a couple themes or a framework, what are some keys of fostering good culture, whether it's business or sports?
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised the number of even collegiate athletic teams, and my guess would be that's very similar for businesses that don't have a mission, a vision, and core values. And I think when a business or a team, any high performing group, doesn't have those things, there's just a lot more fires to put out. So I would say that that is a common theme, as well as just like verbal leadership.
Okay. So that's really surprising and interesting to me because, when you're an employee at a large organization, you hear these things like the mission and vision statement of our company and you're like blah blah blah, right? But I'm curious, like, why is that so important? Like, in reality, in a practical sense, why does that become such a focal point of breeding good culture in an organization?
I think it's like, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we showing up every day? And when there isn't a mission or vision, and you're right, I mean, some people are very much like blah, 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 right, about it. And I get that. Yet when we don't have that, then what does it leave? What are we left with?
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
I actually, having come from that situation where there isn't a clear vision expressed by the leaders, you do feel a little bit disoriented and you feel like it's a little bit of Groundhog's Day. So that's why when I launched my company, which is Iconic Nation Media, it's very important that people understand that the underlying purpose of it is to maximize impact and to help people share the most authentic version of themselves with the world and give their gifts to the world because we launch podcasts. That's what my company does. And I didn't craft that just to have some like one or two liner. Like, I think a lot of leaders are like, okay, what's my mission statement? And they like need to come up with like the right sentence. I think the crafting of it has to be something that truly means something. Like, do you have any tips for how organizations or leaders can think about their own mission or vision statement and like how can it not just be a bunch of like noise in the background? How can it be something that actually has value add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is they need to do it with their people, right? Especially this younger generation. If they're just handed a mission or vision or values and they have like no say in it, that's where we find with athletic teams, I would think there's similarities to businesses, but just like the biggest gaps or problems with it. Or if it's not resonating with your people, could you change one or two of the values? Like either you tweak it a little bit and update it, or you change the people. Yeah. I mean, yes, we have a PDF to help organizations come up with their mission and vision. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I love that. So you either have them co-create, have the people co-create it, and or if there's people that simply are not aligned on their values, they're probably not the right fit for the organization. Oh, that's good. Okay, so that's really interesting. What are some other key findings in terms of culture that you think are really mission critical for folks to establish in their business or their teams?
Ask that again.
Yeah. So you talked about mission and vision being a very important part of establishing really good, productive culture. What other types of themes or pillars are important to create and foster good culture within your organization?
I would say that like both the results matter and the people and how connected they are. But if they're only focused on the results, and some professional teams have this problem, right? That they are solely focused on the win, it actually hurts their winning percentage. But same within business, right? So that the people matter and the connection amongst their people matters as well as the results is another like common theme.
That's interesting. I think that it makes a lot of sense to me too, because what I found is if people don't feel like they are contributing and that they actually matter, they're checked out. They're on autopilot and they're going to give the least. What are ways that leaders of organizations can get the most out of their teams and not just be results driven, but also do that in a very human centric way to maximize each person's or team member's value?
By doing some team building, and whether that's a lunch or, they go axe throwing or whatever it is, but by doing some team building that they actually want to do, that they don't dread, right?
That makes sense. It here's something that's come up, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, but what do you do when you have done all the things that you feel like as a leader you should do to establish good culture, and there's still somebody that's sitting there disgruntled, whether it's a disgruntled teammate, in your case, an athlete, or a disgruntled employee? How do you handle that situation?
Yeah, so I mean, the managers or head coaches, I think that they should lean into the hard conversations, lean in, have that one-on-one conversation, share what you appreciate about that person, what they're doing well, but then also like what is holding them back from becoming their best, and share the hard feedback, right? But if after doing that and performance, indicator type of meetings, maybe there's a better bus out there for them. And that's where I think, whether it's athletic teams or businesses, that sometimes there are people on a team that are slashing the tires of the bus, right? And that just like drastically hurts the rest of the members of the team and their experience, their job satisfaction, their happiness, as well as profit and the success of the team.
Now, I found that in the business world, it seems like the main motivators for people are recognition, title, and pay. And that was just me off the top of my head. That wasn't like me really thinking through it, but I really do think it comes down to those three things and when I say recognition, it's even sometimes just like a thank you, you're doing amazing, I see all your hard work. Like, it doesn't even need to be some big public broadcast of like, this is the employee of the month, although, I'm sure that also obviously would help, but just like the appreciation, the recognition seems to go a long way, just so that it's like, okay, I see you. I'm the CEO. You think I don't see that you're working extra hours or whatever, but I do see you and I do appreciate you. So that's one thing that I think has been really underutilized and is super important, just like a thank you and recognition in a very simple way from leadership. That's one thing. And then people's titles matter. And I've been a part of organizations where they're like, titles don't matter. We run a flat organization. And I'm like, well, but it does matter, because people have pride in their title. Can you speak a little bit about that? Like, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people just definitely want to be like seen, valued, appreciated. I'm sure we've both been in organizations where, maybe we haven't felt like that or others haven't felt like that. But you're right, whether it's like the thank you card or just like the verbal recognition or the public recognition. Like, I'm big on rewarding publicly, but having hard conversations or criticizing privately. But yeah, the title matters, the pay matters. Yes, we all want to be proud of what we're doing and have a reason to do it, and a big why. Why are we leaving our families, or working from home remotely? Why are we investing all of this time? Yeah.
And then how critical is it that I feel like there's also an important level of, I mean, it depends on your organization size, but I feel like you can have the leaders and you can have, for lack of better terms, like the doers. I don't want to say employees, because this can be on a team, but like, how important is it to have that leader amongst the, like, I guess, let me say it this way. When you think of a professional team, you have like your coaches, right? You also have team captains, and then you just have all the rest of the players. How important is that team captain type role. And again, if you're in more of like an executive corporate type role, that would be like the difference between an executive and maybe a director. So the director is the one really liaising. So those kind of critical liaison roles. Can you speak a little bit about, the role that those people should be playing and what happens when they don't maybe support the leadership? Like, what can you give us some good, bad, and ugly of those kinds of liaison type roles?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I heard this quote, and I don't remember who said it, to be honest, but it was like, good advice for anyone in, maybe an introductory position in business or an introductory position on an athletic team is make the leader's agenda your agenda for a season, right? So, like, how are you moving the organization forward, right? But yeah, I've seen teams where, captains are almost like an anti-captain, right? Like there's leadership in the wrong opposite direction, and it's so detrimental to
Right.
an
Yeah.
athletic team and a business. Yeah.
Well, and I can see how that is tricky. Like for example, if I'm a director and I report to a VP or an executive or whatever, or let's just stick with this idea of you're a professional athlete and you're the team captain and the coach is basically saying, this is the sentiment direction of the team, and then you as the team captain, it's just like you don't agree with it, like you don't agree with the overall approach or the strategy or whatever, and you're just not on the same page. Instead of turning around and being like basically undermining the coaches, then what is the best, like how do you resolve that?
To have the conversation with the head coach or the VP or the owner, right, in business, but to lean in and have the conversation and try to get onto the same page. I mean, maybe it's that, the game plan isn't working and it needs to be adjusted. And I mean, that's a valid opinion, but to just like meet with the coach and do that rather than doing that with all of the other members of the team.
Yeah. And I think where this goes sideways is on both. It can be one or both, kind of depending on who it is. So let's pretend I'm the team captain and I don't, going back down what you just said, like I tried the coach's approach. Our team was trying it. It wasn't working out. And I know that, and the team knows that. But the coach is still just heads down. This is the strategy. And I feel a sense of responsibility to share that feedback. But unfortunately, the coach is not receptive. It's his way or the highway, or her way or the highway. I think that's where there's a huge breakdown. That's what I've seen so many times where that key person, that captain, team captain, director type person, they know what's good and what's bad, but it seems like the leaders oftentimes are not receptive. On the flip side, I think there's also the situation where that key person, that team captain role, they are just simply afraid to voice their opinion because, let's face it, these are people's livelihoods. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that that's very much like an old school coaching method that isn't used as much or as effective in 2024. That I've heard stories. I worked with a Division 1 men's soccer team who they were in the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row. And he asked 6 of his players to come into, a meeting room in the hotel at the NCAA tournament. And together, the 7 of them came up with the game plan of how they were going to beat the opponent. And sure enough, it worked, and they went to the next round of the NCAA championship. So I just think this younger generation, and they're in our businesses too, but they want to be led differently than when we grew up, and they want to be a part of it. And when they're not at all a part of it, and I've made this mistake too, I should say that I've made this mistake at times, right? That it's just not as effective in athletics. And my guess would be in business.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think that some of the most successful transformations I've had in business come from the fact that, yes, this is a totally different way of doing your job. And a lot of employees are not comfortable with that. Like when you change employees' jobs, for example, or a strategy or whatever, you're usually going to be met with resistance. And the way I've personally been very successful at this is by engaging with them at their level to say, look, you're the expert of your process. So it's important to me that I understand your thoughts on this. This is kind of what I'm thinking, but I need to
Mm.
see what are the pros and cons, like just what are your thoughts on this? And when you engage people one on one like that, you'd be surprised, it's really underrated. And so I think a lot of people in leadership opportunities really need to open those communications with their team members and like get on their level, and none of this I'm up here, you're down here. Like that's not the point. The point is together we see that there's ABC problems. So how can we co-create solutions? Like here's my thoughts. What are your thoughts? And then when they actually say, well, I don't think this would work, instead of like, if someone said to me, Kimberly, well, I don't think your approach would work, instead of me immediately getting, defensive essentially, right? It's okay, I want to hear why. Tell me why you think that won't work, or better yet, tell me what you think would work best. So that it's not really based on me and Kimberly's idea versus so and so's idea. It's not about who owns the idea, it's about co creating an outcome that everybody agrees with. And that
Yeah.
is how I've been able to really evoke so much transformation. Um,
Wow. That's
yeah,
brilliant, Kimberly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Tell
thank
me
you.
what you think would work best.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then really listening to people, because here's the thing. I know people, especially if you're more seasoned in your career, you have this almost like an ego of like, I know how to do this. The problem is, and this is what I learned as being a consultant, is I worked across so many different organizations that, there's nuanced processes. And usually if somebody's doing like a nuanced or a broken process, there's a reason. Like there's some reason why. For example, why are you doing a 10-step approach to get this one task done? And when you really look under the hood and ask them about like, why are you doing this, as opposed to saying, you're doing it wrong and this is how it should be done, instead of that, there might be details like, oh, well, I don't have access to these tools that we really need. Like real tangible responses will come from that you as a leader probably don't know, and you definitely need to know. So like the listening component is so important, I think, as a leader. So I don't know. Okay, so tell me, what else did you find with your culture coaching, or what are some other great tips about like enhancing your culture?
Well, we could pivot a little bit and talk about like energy and, what to do when others in your environment are complaining or gossiping or trash talking management or head coaches kind of thing.
Oh, I want to hear all about it. The
Yeah.
negative water cooler talk. Okay, what do we do when there's disgruntled teammates, or there's chatter about this one or that one, and it becomes like a toxic work environment? What do we do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a big believer that we feel the energy with people that are within 20 feet of us. And just
Mm.
that in order to be a full cup to pour into others, whether that's your own children or the team that you lead, that we really need to like protect our energy at all costs. So for me personally, if I'm at my son's baseball game and all out of love and no judgment, right? But if there's another parent that's complaining, gossiping, trash talking the coaches, I just politely walk away and I, pick up my cell phone. I got to make a call really quick, or I'm going to use the bathroom, those kind of things.
What if you happen to agree with that person? Do you engage or you don't engage?
I don't. Because it's like, for me, it's really like, am I being authentic? If I'm teaching these things to other teams and athletes, but I'm not living it, that doesn't feel right to me. So it's things that I'm figuring out in my 40s that I wish I would have. I did engage before, in my 20s or 30s, but it's things that I'm figuring out now. But I think it's really like what the coach does as a parent of an athlete is out of my control, right? It's totally out of my control. The lineup, it's out of my control as a parent. So the more that we give our focus to things that are outside of our control, in my opinion, we give away a little bit of our own greatness.
That's good. So, yeah, and you're kind of starting to touch on youth sports. So, I would love to hear how you feel about the appropriate level of competition for youth. And here's what I mean. I'm just going to use this as a quick example. Like, I played club soccer at 10 years old, which was very young at that time. It was the youngest, that I had heard of at that time. And nowadays, there are somebody literally on Saturday just said to me, "Oh yeah, my daughter got recruited to a club team. She's 5 and she's in kindergarten." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And again, like, I don't know anything about the details of it. I was just shocked. I was just really stunned by it. But I mean, I know that there's been this trend of like really like having children choose one main sport at a very young age and just doubling down and like getting extra coaching. Like, I have someone that they're using, a professional private coach for ABC Sports or whatever. And like, look, I don't judge these families because it's really up to the parent, in my opinion. But I guess I'm curious what you think about, for someone like me, my kids are not going to be professional athletes. And even if they could be, I wouldn't want them to take that approach just because, for my own reasons. And again, if other people want that and it makes sense for their families, that's absolutely fine. But I guess where I get kind of, you know, I get a little bit unsure of myself as a parent because, on one hand, yes, I want my child to build confidence and be competitive. And I fully believe in competition and meritocracy. And I think there's so much value to that. I think there's so much character building that happens with that. But I also get a little bit uncomfortable because I'm like, well, I know that my son isn't going to be in the NFL, so I'm not going to get him private this, that, and the other. But then is he going to fall behind? So it's almost like if you don't push your kids, then they're going to end up being like at the bottom of the barrel. And it just feels like uncomfortable for me, and I'm just not sure what the right balance is. Curious what you think as a mom and also as a culture coach and mindset coach.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a healthy balance. And I think it's okay to support those kids that are really driven, and they want some of those extra lessons. That's okay to support it. I think it's just like, where is the drive coming from? I do think our generation of parents that it can be a little too much, you know? I mean, all of the research supports multi-sport athletes is just healthier, even better eventually for when they, maybe go down to one sport in high school or college. But the research would support multi-sport athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think a rest in all of this is okay. A small off season is okay. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. That's really
I
good.
mean, even in the sport of baseball, and I'm not a physical therapist, so this isn't my area of expertise. I can just share his study, but it's shift movement science, Dr. Dave Tilley and his partner, but one of them works in the MLB, but they've shared their research about, UCL in the elbow being torn when pitchers pitch 12 months a year versus 10 or 11 months a year. So, and the how much that's like skyrocketed. I don't remember the exact amount, something like 200%. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, I think that there is a place for an off season. I will also say, so my cousin is William Humphreys. His son is Chris Humphreys, who played, over 10 years in the NBA. I do think it's important, like, not to put a cap on our kids with our words. Like, you're not going to be this, you're not going to be that. And the story behind this is when Chris Humphreys was in middle school, his dream was to be in the NBA. And his middle school teacher told him, like, you need to come up with a realistic dream. You're not going to do that. And my cousin, William Humphreys, went and spoke to that middle school teacher and told him, don't ever tell my son that again. And sure enough, he was one of the, 0.1% that did play in the NBA. But yeah, I think it's
Wow.
important just like not to put a cap on people and on our kids. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Okay, then maybe my kids could be professional athletes. I'm gonna leave that open. You know what? I'm just gonna leave that out there in the universe. But yeah, I do like what you said about because one of my kids is more competitive. Like for example, so my daughter Charlotte, she's really into gymnastics. Now that wouldn't be my sport of choice. Because one, I never really competitively did it, so I personally don't have a connection to the sport selfishly. The second thing is it's not as team oriented as I would like. And the third thing is the physical impact on their bodies. You know, she's like a contortionist and it just, ugh, I just don't want her to get injured. But again, what I try and do is I let her lead it. So I did let her join the team because she asked. She
Hmm.
specifically asked and she asked to
Yep.
compete. So I think that I'm trying to figure out the best balance because on one hand, I know that it's not about me as the parent. Again, it's not my choice as a sport, but she loves it. So like we only started it because it was just a close activity nearby, to be honest with you. I had no intention of this being like a main sport for her whatsoever, but she loves it so much and I'm supporting her through that. But I also see like you could get really into it and it could get very competitive. And so I'm not pushing her into that. I'm just kind of letting her lead right now.
And that is the best thing as a parent that you can do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to do because I
Yeah.
really just want to be like, we're not doing this anymore. But she loves it so much that I'm like, that's not right. I can't take it from her either,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So it's super
Right. But
tricky.
isn't that like our job? And it's hard too, right? Because, we have dreams for them too. But I think it's our job as moms and dads to figure out like what are their gifts and give them permission to be who they genuinely are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's
So,
awesome, Kimberly, that you let her
okay.
do that and that you support it.
Yeah. A little
Yeah,
bit like begrudgingly, but I try not to say anything.
for sure.
Um, okay, so then tell me more about the energy. Kind of like what are some things around energy in terms of like focal points for you or themes or things that you really like to focus on that really have high impact for teams?
I would just say like protecting your energy and auditing your inner circle. And again, I'm like currently figuring this out in my 40s and wish that I would have a decade ago, but meaning like who in your life with their words and actions isn't supportive of you, right? Or you leave, maybe it's, I don't, a couple neighbors, or maybe it's even a family member, right? But you leave them and you feel drained or you feel anxious before you go, right? I think that's like our gut telling us. And again, all out of love and no judgment, but maybe they aren't meant to be in our lives
Mm-hmm.
forever, right? Maybe they were meant to be in our lives for a season. So I'm just like very mindful of that.
I am so mindful of that. It's so interesting. I actually spoke about this a little bit on another episode where I was telling the listeners, like, it's so random that people will, of all the things to say to me, people like random people. I'm talking about like preschool at my baby's at London's preschool, at kind of all different walks of life of different things that I'm out and about doing. People compliment me the most on my energy, which is such a bizarre, like when you think about it, you're like, that's such a bizarre compliment. But like it's become a theme, and I take it as a huge compliment now because I work hard to protect my energy and to keep myself really like in good spirits. And I do that. In fact, my cousin came out from Switzerland and she was like, how do you have so much energy? And I'm like, oh, it's because I don't feed into toxic energy. Like I literally do not. And on every
Same.
level, whether
Yep.
it's like content consumption, the sensationalizing the bad news out there, or whether it's downbeating a coach or a teacher like you're saying, I don't engage in it. It's just not productive energy for me. So I'd love to hear kind of any tips or maybe realizations or ways that you're able to really protect your energy as well.
Yeah, I feel like I've just been in a season of observation, you know, and again, I'm like super grateful that I'm here now, but yeah, that I too, and I also get that compliment a lot. And I'm, like I said, just thankful for it. But no, I just choose not to engage in it, and I walk away, or I limit time with people that's where they're at in life. And again, by doing so, I think like I'm the most whole person to pour into these teams, the athletes I serve one on one, my two sons, my husband. And since I've been doing that, my relationships like are just so much better. My own marriage. Yeah.
1000%. Yeah, and I also think just like having good rest and exercise, like for me, the exercise puts me on a whole different like energetic plane. Like I just feel like, I don't know, it's just so helpful. Um, and I like what you said about limiting contact with people that give you that like weighted down type energy. I think that's super important to pay attention to. Like if you're dreading seeing somebody, it is what it is. You might not vibe with them. But what do you do when you're like, as you're working with these athletes, say that you see either an athlete's mindset and their energy is off? Like, what are some things that you'll coach them on to maybe like get into a different headspace and like change their vibe?
I think just asking them, like, trying to get down to the bottom of like, what is going on, what's on their mind, like what went well this last week, what didn't, how you feeling on a scale from 1 to 10. But then too, using a lot of like I am statements and making sure that our words move us closer to our goals, right? So I am, and for your daughter, an awesome gymnast. I am a champion. I am a great student athlete. I'm a queen on the balance beam.
I love that. I also think that we're not good enough about lifting each other up, like really verbally. So here's something like really important. I think especially as women, and I think men are actually much better at this, but if you've noticed, men are pretty good about building each other up. Like, oh, there he is. There's my main man. This guy crushes it on the court. There he is. He's going to go do some dunks or whatever, you know? And they'll be like, you know, high fiving and fist bumping and how you doing, bro? And all that kind of stuff, right? It's like good vibes. Women, they see this like beautiful, strong, incredibly talented woman, and they're immediately picking apart why that woman sucks. It's like our
Yes.
human nature. And I personally have learned and trained myself very hard, and I've done this now for so many years that it's actually completely natural now. But when I see a beautiful woman now that's like amazing, because there's so many impressive, incredible women out there, instead of the gut reaction being jealous and then quickly trying to pinpoint something wrong, I'll be like, wow, you are a queen. Look at this beautiful queen. She walks in here with her gorgeous suit on, ready to just crush it in the boardroom. Like, we don't deserve you. Like, I'll say stuff like that to people. Because, like,
Which
I
is awesome
admire them.
because, yes, like our best self is when we're complimenting others and lifting others up. It's not when we're tearing others down.
No, I do not like that at all. So I would like to implore the folks listening now, if you find yourself picking apart somebody else, I want you to pause. And a lot of times it happens quickly and it happens in your own head and you don't even realize you're doing it half the time. But this is something that I think is so important as a society, but it's really up to the individual to truly do this. Is like really work hard that every time you see yourself trying to pick somebody apart, stop yourself and say, why am I doing that? And then you're going to say, oh, I'm jealous. She's more successful. She has more money. She has a better relationship. She has this, she has that. But I think we really need to stop ourselves in our tracks and take ownership of those narratives. And if you see somebody that is just like sitting in their greatness, call it out. Be like, you're a queen, you're a goddess. We don't deserve. I say that to my friends all the time, and I mean it. I'm not just saying it to say it. I'm saying it because I'm celebrating them. I'm in awe of them. I like fangirl over them because I think they're
Yeah.
so awesome, you
Yeah.
know? And
And
it does,
shouldn't more women just like celebrate others'
yes.
lights? Yes.
There's so many incredible women out there, and I just feel like for some reason, I don't know if it's some genetic thing with us or biological or whatever, I have no idea why, that we go into the tearing down mode. And it's just so unhealthy. And especially if you are a parent, because your kids are then watching that and then they're going to learn to be critical of other people. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I know I've worked on, and it feels so great. And I love getting to celebrate my friends that are amazing. And I have so many amazing friends, and like I get to be friends with them. How awesome is that?
Same.
Right?
Yep.
It's like there's
Yes.
nothing better. And
Yep.
I think it's fantastic. You know, there's this
Agree.
quote, and I was just talking to my production team about it. We were having a deep conversation after we filmed a show over the weekend, and it was really cool. And one thing that I shared with one of the producers, she was like talking about how gardens are like such a metaphor for life and all this stuff. And I was telling her in COVID, I had this realization that I was running outside, and I realized as I look at my neighbor's gardens, what I see is there could be one flower that's like this blossoming orange, and then right next to it, there's this other kind of flower, totally different, that's purple. And then, you know, there's all these, you know, then there's roses. And what you know, what I notice is just because the orange one blossomed, it's not like the purple flower looked over and said, "Oh, I can't blossom." Like the one next to me is already shining. And the point is like there's enough abundance and success for all of us. And just because like your friend, let's just say, is like crushing it at whatever they're doing, that does not mean there's not enough for you,
Yeah.
you know? And I think we think of it like me versus you, and it's like that's just not reality. So that's
Yeah.
something that really like helped me also to like remember like okay, just because so and so is blossoming and doing amazing, that does not mean I can't also.
Yeah. Yeah, and the truth is like on an athletic team or in a business, a high tide raises all boats, right? So if your colleague is really successful in something and you work together, that's going to help everybody. If you're celebrating that, right? If the culture is where it should be, a high tide raises all the boats.
And the other important thing, this is another really kind of along those exactly what you're talking about, is if that one person on the team is getting the recognition, the if it let's just pretend I'm the team captain and I got all this praise from the coaches in front of the team, instead of me just like basking in the glory being like I'm such an amazing team captain, like it is important to shine the light back on the other people that contributed. That is, I'm really big on that.
Yep.
Like I do that in my business where, you know, I'm more client facing. So I have a lot of the relationships of like podcasters that we're launching. But when my production team comes in, or social media, or, you know, photographers or whoever is part of the team, if the client is super happy, I'll be like, yeah, it's because Joe and Holly crushed it. Like they just crushed it on their production. They were so prepared. And like I always am trying to really talk up my team members that truly did. Like, it's genuine. It's not just me like blowing smoke. Like it's genuine. Like these are the people that really like helped us get to this point. So I just think giving those accolades kind of for the right people is really important too.
So I think I'm gonna make a note and recognize the four members of my team this week because of our conversation. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. Yeah, I remember when I was more junior and like I would have these big bosses and I would be doing all this like really technical work, working 100-hour weeks, like really killing myself to make my boss shine. And I loved it. I didn't need the accolades in terms of like my boss is getting, you know, the accolades at the top from her bosses, and that makes me feel good because I know I helped her get there and she knows I helped her too. But it would feel good if every once in a while she'd say, "Oh, well, thank you, you know, my team did an amazing job and it was, you know, this one, that one, and Kimberly helped." And, you know, and just recognizing people's contributions, it's